Hi, I'm Ravi from Autowave. So in this video, we've got a Golf R 2014, which is an MQB system. It's an all keys lost scenario, and we're going to cut and program a new key using the Obdstar sync data calculation function. If you like these type of videos, please like and subscribe. And if you've got any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. So with this type of scenario, first thing we'll have to do is to make a key to the vehicle. Now, I'm going to use a method of picking the lock, decoding the lock and cutting a key. We'll then need to read the instrument cluster. To calculate the sync data, we'll also need the transmission data and the ECU data as well. This is a non-keyless, but it is automatic. So as you can see from inside the vehicle, it's got an automatic gearbox. It's not a keyless though, it's a bladed ignition. And I'm going to show you the steps, exactly what's involved, which modules to remove and exactly how to do that. So first of all, what we'll do is we'll make the actual blade for the key for the car, which we'll be using a lockpick to do that. So I'll just quickly get on with that. We've got some more videos coming with actual lockpicking tutorials. So I'll just get on with picking the lock and decoding the key. Okay, so I put my bittings into a condor machine. I've cut my blade. So you've got 8 cuts on the HU66 blade. So I've just cut a test blade just to see if it actually works in the vehicle, and we'll go to the vehicle now and try it. So I'm just going to try it in the door lock. So it turns in the door lock. Locked. Unlocked. And I've just tried it in the ignition as well. Yep, turns in the ignition. I've disconnected the battery, that's why we've got no dash lights. So for this, we're going to need to read the instrument cluster data. So now I've got my blade. I'm just going to leave it in here so it's safe, but I've got the bitting saved on my key cutting machine. So in order to remove the instrument cluster in this vehicle, now I've done a fair bit of the work. What we have to do, we have to take this center panel off here. This is on clips. We will then need to take this panel off. We can just leave that here, because as you can see, that holds in the instrument cluster. We take out this vent, which fully removes. You can see it's a repo. Obviously it's got all this garbage in the car. And then we take out this panel. This panel can be even taken out first if you want to. You've got 2 torque screws just underneath, which I've already removed. So you've got torque style screws, 2 just underneath there. And then the instrument cluster, sorry, you've got a cover as well here. And then the instrument cluster will just slide out, and then you've got 1 plug on the back, just here at the bottom. So I'll just remove that plug, and the cluster is out. So that's a single plug. There's a cluster. It's got the part number on there. Now I know this is a locked Johnson control cluster, but at the moment that's not 100% relevant. So we'll need the clocks. What we'll also need to do, I'm just going to leave them on the seat for now. What we'll also need to do is, being an automatic, we'll need the data from the transmission module, and we'll also need the data from the ECU. Now, most of the time with the Obdstar, you can just connect onto the ECU or connect onto the transmission module. Ironically, in this particular video, we've got a certain type of ECU that we're going to have to solder onto the board, but we'll do all of that. So you've got a battery tray, which will need to be removed, and what I've already removed with a 13mm socket is a little battery holder. Disconnected the terminals, so we're going to take the battery out. So we've got the ECU here, and it's got a label, and it tells me it's a CMOS 18.1. So I'm going to remove the ECU. Okay, so as I said, we've got CMOS 18.1. So now I've identified the type of ECU. Now what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to remove the battery tray, this air box, and to get the air box out, obviously there's various methods, and I'm not a mechanic, but I do know my way around these sorts of things. So we've taken a few torque screws out here, taken this cover off. There's a couple of screws here. It allows us to just move that out of the way and take the air box and the battery tray out. In the battery tray, you've got a couple of bolts which hold it in place, which we've taken out. So I'm just going to remove these things, and you will need to just disconnect the air intake there. So if I just carefully remove these things, I just put that back here, and then the battery tray we have already disconnected. And then you will see it leaves the plug to the transmission exposed, and that's what we're going to connect onto, because Obdstar do a specific connector for that transmission. Now this is a DQ250 transmission. On there's two types listed on the Obdstar. One has immobilizer data and one doesn't have immobilizer data. This one does, and that you can contact Autowave, or you can look on something like PartsLink to identify the type of transmission it actually is. So I know that this one has got immobilizer data in. So to disconnect the plug on here, all you do is you just twist the connector like so, and then it exposes the plug to the transmission. So we're going to do it in the order: read the cluster, read the ECU, read the transmission. Now you've got various methods of reading the instrument cluster. You can read it with the Obdstar adapter, where you can solder on. You can read it with something like X-Horse, and there are other tools that you can read it with. I've gone ahead and read it with another tool and decrypted the data, so I've got a file ready, and I'll just show you the actual cluster and how to identify the actual MCU. Okay, so obviously you've just seen we remove the screws from the instrument cluster, and then we can take the back panel off the actual cluster. Now you've got a couple of different types. Now if I go to the Obdstar, so we go to VW. Now we manually select by system, we select VW, MQB meter, all keys lost. Now this is where you need to be connected to the internet, which we are. Now this is where you select the top one, read immo module data. So we've got 4 potential places: dashboard, ECU, transmission, and electronic steering lock. That's only relevant, the bottom one, so option 4, is only relevant if it's a keyless vehicle. So if I go to read dashboard immo data, you've got all these options. So first thing we've got to do is identify which one it is. And we do that by looking at the back of the cluster and looking at the part number on here. Now it says on here D70F3537. That's what it says on the MCU. And on the Obdstar, I can see that option. So if I select that option, now we've got 2 options. Either we can read the immo data using the Obdstar RH850 adapter or V850 adapter, and it's got a guide. Tells you what it will do. It's also got a pinout. Now this is where it's got an image of the actual instrument cluster, and you can see where you would solder on. It's got 8 wires to solder on, so it's not massively difficult, and obviously you can see the area where you need to solder onto. So you've got that option, or you've got other things in the market. I've cheated a little bit, and I've used a solderless adapter to read the data from this particular cluster. Now this is a Johnson control, so because I've used another device, I've loaded that into the Obdstar, and I can just press parse immo data, and I can load up my D flash and P flash. So if I press start, it can select. So I've got my P flash there, D flash, and it will calculate the immo data. So this will actually show me the vehicle details, well, the VIN number, component security, and various other bits of information, as you'll see on the screen in a second. Okay, so it's asked us to enter a file name for us to save it with. So we've put a file name in, it's just automatically populated, and then it brings up some details from the vehicle, component security, VIN number, and various other things. So that's all good, so that part is done. So it's saved with everything successful. So next we can go to the next part of data, which is read ECM immo. So now I'm going to select read ECM immo. It's got various ECUs that it supports. As you may remember, this one is a CMOS 18.1. So if I select CMOS 18.1 on my device, press enter, I'll be using the MP001, which comes with the G3 device, to then read the data. Now, often you can read it without having to, so just by pinning out. Ironically, this one, I'm going to have to put it into boot mode and read it. So I'm going to have to solder onto the board. So if I can click my help, and then it tells me obviously what I will need. So I'll need my C402, C401, C402, and various connectors, which I have because they all come with the Obdstar G3. Then I can go into, press OK. It will then load us into the menu of the actual ECU. Now this is the capabilities of Obdstar with the ECU. Obviously you need to be connected to the internet to allow this function to happen. And you can see on here you've got various functions, but ultimately I need to connect to it and read the data. So we've got a guide of exactly what it can and can't do. We also have an image of the ECU which matches my image here. So I know I've got the right ECU. Then it's also got a connector pinout. So it tells me where I need to pin out onto the connector. And it's got a PCB pinout. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to solder a few wires onto the ECU, but not the end of the world. Obviously, it's got risks. Disassemble. Tells us to solder the wires, then connect the pinouts, and then connect the MP001. So it tells us the steps that we need to do it. And then once we've done that, we can then work on the, look at communicating with the ECU. So I'll get on with doing that. Okay, so we've got our wires soldered on eventually. It is quite small, not ideal, but we got there in the end. So soldered on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to connect the pinouts and then we're going to read the data. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So we can see we need the bench cable, V3 bench cable, which it says on the diagram. So you've got the bench cable, which you can see on the diagram, and then you can see which points that we need to connect. So we've got our ECU just laid down. Ironically, it's upside down, but we can do that no problem. Hi, so I've soldered onto the ECU. Now I've had to revisit this. The reason is I came across an issue, and it's because I overlooked a very, very small instruction, and which is very easy to overlook. Now with the Obdstar G3, you get a 12 volt 2 amp power supply. That power supply is not sufficient to read the ECU. You need to use a 5 amp 12 volt power supply. So I'm using my Atten TPR32. So if we look at the device, look on the screen, I'll show you exactly where it tells you this. So if I go to read ECM, CMOS 18.1, if I go to my help section on here, it tells me the connectors to use, which were correct. I go into OK. Now, when I show you the guide, it specifically says this. And it's a very easy mistake to make. So if I go into guide, it tells us on the screen, DC regulator power supply, voltage 12 to 15 volt, current not less than 5 amp. So it does actually tell you that on here. Our standard power adapter, 2 amp, is only for charging, not for reading. Now I'm going to show you that as well. So I've got, it shows as per the diagram, it shows you can connect onto here. So if you can just see here, the power supply is connected, the normal Obdstar one, to the device, which is as per the diagram. Now whether you connect to here or you connect to here is actually the same. So I will just press connect. Now you'll see here, it's going to try and communicate with the ECU. It will fail the communication. Okay, so you'll see communication error, ECU not responding. And that's because I'm using the power supply, which is insufficient. So I'm going to take that power supply out. Now, whether you connect it to the Obdstar, you connect to the MP001, it makes no difference. It actually goes to the same place. I'm now going to use my Atten. I've set it to 12 volt, 5 amp. This is a smart power supply. It's really good, and it's used for a variety of functions, ECU reading being one of them. I'm now going to connect this into my MP001. I've set it to 12 volt, 5 amp. I'm just going to hit output, So now this, because it's smart, whatever, up to 5 amp, whatever the ECU draws, it will use. So right now it's a 1.5 amp. Now when I hit connect, it will read the data. Okay, here we go, initializing, communicating. You hear this click, it's now gone above 2 amp that it's drawing, read pin code, verifying password, right into bootloader. So now it's actually communicating with the ECU. Right, we're connected. So now we are connected to the ECU. Very important that you have to connect and disconnect. So now I will hit read internal flash. It's reading now. So there's 32 sectors that it's reading, as you can see on the screen. Right, so it's read the internal flash. I'm just going to save that. Now I'm going to read the internal EEPROM. Now the flash can take, you know, a good 5-10 minutes to read, so just be patient and just let it read. It obviously shows you everything on the screen. So reading the EEPROM now, obviously much smaller amount of data, so this is a lot faster. So we read the EEPROM data, and I'm just going to now save that data as well. So this is all saved onto the actual device itself. Okay, so that's great. Now I'm going to press immo data decryption, and I'm going to load up my flash and my EEPROM, which are already there because they're saved onto the device. So now it's just going to decrypt the immo data from those 2 files that we've read. And during this time, we're still connected to the ECU, hence why the power supply is still reading above 2 amps, because the ECU is still drawing current. And then once we've completed our tasks, we will press the disconnect button, so it does basically shuts the ECU down correctly. Okay, so it's given us our component security, and obviously it's read out the data of the vehicle. I'm just going to take a photo, although this data will still be on the device and it'll be fine. Okay, so we're going to save that as the immo data. I'm going to hit OK. So now that immo data is saved. So I'm going to press disconnect and disconnect from the ECU. And as you'll see here, the current draw has dropped down to less than 2 amps. So now we're fully disconnected from the ECU. So at this point now, I can take my wires off. Very important, when you put the ECU back together, make sure you seal it up as well, because this was a sealed unit. Obviously it's going to be in the engine bay, so it is going to have all the elements exposed to it. So make sure when you put your ECU back, obviously it's nice and sealed, so at least the customer's not going to have any issues caused by this process in the future. Next thing we'll do after that is read the transmission data. Okay, so continuing with this job, we're going to now read the transmission data. So as you can see just down here, this is the transmission module plug. Now the transmission module is a DQ250, as we've mentioned. Autowave can do a parts check, or you can go on something like PartsLink to establish which type of transmission. Now if I look on the device, I go back into my VW menu, as you can see on the screen, and manually select model, MQB meter, all keys lost. Now if I go into read immo module data, read TCM. Now I click on DQ250, press enter. It says you need to use a P004 adapter. The P004 adapter is this one. You get this with your G3. And on the back side of it, you can see you've got two switches here, and it will tell you what configuration to have them in on the menu. You've also got a button. Now when it's depressed, that's the ignition on, and when you have it when it's up, so when it's not depressed, it clicks in and out, that's ignition off. So ignition off, ignition on. I'm going to leave it in the off position for now. So if I select help on the device, it tells me that I need to use a P004 adapter, which I've got. Now I'll hit OK and go to the next screen. Now with Obdstar and transmission modules, you can buy a 7-in-1 TCM kit. You can also buy individual cables. This just makes it easier to connect in, because otherwise you'd have to pin out. So the diagram on the actual, so we're into the TCM menu now. So if I select guide, it tells you obviously what it can and can't do. It also gives you a schematic. Now you see on the screen it says on stroke off. So what that means is I'm going to have on, and then the other one is off. on the dip switches. You can use the connector, which I will just show you in a moment, or you can use the specific TCM connector. Now if I press special connector, it tells me TCM 002. As you can see on here, TCM 002, which is for a DQ 250. So that's the connector I'm going to use. So I select the right connector, I plug it in to the P004. I will then connect OBD end of the device to this end. So that's how you would connect it. Your alternative to this method is to use this connector and your pin-out cables and manually pin out. Not greatly convenient when it's in the engine bay. It's doable, but for the sake of what the specific transmission connectors cost, it's always better to use these, in my opinion. So I'm just going to drop these somewhere else. If you just follow me down here, I'm going to connect onto the transmission module. So I just twist the connector off, and then my Obdstar connector, I'm going to disconnect it from there because it's a bit easier for me to put on. It's got an arrow, which is the top. Slide it on, slide it into place, and now I'm just going to connect back to my P004. So now we're connected to the transmission module. As you will also see on the guide, it requires power. Now in the previous part of the video, I used the power supply. It's not particularly convenient here. I've got just a 3 amp 12 volt power supply, which I'm going to use. So I'm going to connect that directly into my OBD connector here. Go back. So now I'm in a position to connect to the transmission module. So I press connect. You need to be connected to the internet. It says switch ignition off. My ignition is off on this little switch here. So you can see on the P004, it's in the off position. There's no LED there, it's in the off position. So I press OK. Then it says, after tapping yes, press the ignition, switch the ignition on. So I'm pressing yes, and I'm just gonna now turn the ignition on. As you can see, the LED has come on. So now it's communicating, and it's just doing a security verification. So now we're communicating with the transmission module directly using the Obdstar device, the P004, my dedicated connector. No soldering, nothing like that. Okay, so we are connected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the immo data decryption. So it's reading the, I press immo data decryption, and it's reading the immobilizer data. This is the data that I'll need for the to calculate the sync code. So it's come up with the VIN, the CS, and various other things. I press OK, and I'm going to save that. It enters a file name automatically, so I'm just saving that data. So now I have saved that data successfully. You can see that lots of other functions as well, but I'm not going to go into that right now. So if I press disconnect, I'm disconnecting from TCM. You don't just disconnect the plug, you need to disconnect via the device. So it says switch ignition off. So I'm depressing my button again. So now the LED's gone off, and I'm going to press OK. Right, so I've disconnected. Now it's safe for me to disconnect the connector from the transmission module. So I'm just very quickly going to disconnect the connector and just take the power off. And now we're going to look at calculating the sync data. And then what I've decided to do is, before I forget, I'm actually going to reconnect this back on, because otherwise, if I don't connect it and I try to put everything back together, I'll be in a bit of a problem. So just going to reconnect it back on. There we go, twisted it back into place, just lined up the connector, give it a little tug. That's all connected back on successfully. So now what I can do is I can start putting all this back together. So I put it all back together, get the battery connected, calculate the sync data, and get the key programmed in. Okay, so we read all our data. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the device, we're going to load all of our data, calculate the sync data, and make the dealer key. Once we've made the dealer key, we can connect into the vehicle and learn the key in. So first of all, just to reiterate, immo data, which we've read from the dashboard, done. ECU data, we read from the ECU, done. Transmission data, we read from the transmission, done. The car is not a keyless car, so we didn't need to read the ELV data. If we did need to read it, there is a connector available. So in a future video, we will have one with a keyless, and and then we'll read the ERB data. But in this instance, we don't need that. So now I'm going to calculate sync data. It has blade or proximity. We're going to be using an AUTRK0079, which is a bladed MQB remote blade. So here we go. Let's start the process. So, dashboard. Let's load the data, and I can see here we've got our immo data from the cluster. Okay. On the ECU, let's load our data. I can see here is my ECU immo data, and then I've got transmission. Now you see here it says TCM without immo. If it wasn't an automatic vehicle, I'd select that, but I've got my transmission data, so I will select TCM data here, and then it's calculating the sync code. So it's calculating the sync code and it's giving me a file name. I'm going to press OK. Synchronization data code calculation completed. So it's calculated the sync data as fast as that, and I've got a file there ready. So now I'm going to hit back. I've calculated my sync data. Now I'm going to make a dealer key. So making a dealer key, I'm going to load my dashboard data, I'm going to load my sync data, which is just calculated, and then I'm going to make the dealer key. So I hit start, instrument cluster. So we've got ICM, immo data, we've got the sync data, which is here, sync code, and now we're going to make our dealer key. So it's VW, I'm going to drop the key in there, and I'm going to press OK. It says place the new key into the key sensing coil. So it's making the dealer key now. Now obviously my file names, I've just kept them as default. Sometimes it's a bit easier to actually name them a bit better, so when you've got multiple files, you know exactly what you're looking at. Make dealer key successfully. Right, so that has made the dealer key. So now, obviously we've cut a blade previously, just to make sure when we pick the lock. I'm just going to cut that blade, and now we're going to load it in using the device, and I'm going to plug in OBD and do that. Okay, so now as you can see, we've got the OBD connected. The OBD connector is just down at the bottom above the pedals. It's just here. Yeah. So we connected our OBD. All I've done is just plug the instrument cluster back in. So I want to make sure everything works fine, and then I'll worry about putting it all back together properly. So we've cut our remote key, turned it in the ignition, and it turns fine. Instrument cluster comes on, absolutely fine. Obviously says error, but that's as expected. So I'm now going to press program keys. We've already made this into a dealer key. Load the instrument cluster immobilizer data, which is what we read earlier. So I've got here ICM immo data. OK. Press OK. It's got all my data in there. OK. Prepare all keys, because when we learn this in, it's going to erase any other keys that are in the system, which is fine because I've only got one. I'm going to input keys 1. If I wanted to add any other keys at a later stage, I just do them as an add key. So I press blade, OK. It says please open the hood of the vehicle, which we have open anyway, and press OK. So ignition is off. Press OK. Now I press the ignition on and press OK. And we should see on the dashboard in a second, here we go, key mode 0 of 1. So now I'm going to turn the ignition, well, the ignition's already on, it's gone key mode 1 of 1. So we put it into learning mode. It's gone into learning mode, it's gone to 1 of 1. The device is obviously communicating with it, and the process learn complete. So now the key is learned. So if I take the key out, so now programmed in, central locking working. I'm going to try and start the vehicle, and there we go, all fired up. Now, bearing in mind that this is a repo car, we don't actually know any history on it. Obviously, it all fires up. We've got some ES stability control errors, but that's going to be down to the vehicle. Again, we don't know any history. A lot of the time, things like this this traction light, once you've driven a mile or two, some of the lights will go. But anyway, that's not what we have. You know, that's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with doing a lost keys on an MQB. So just to confirm, we've got a Golf 2014. It's a Golf R. We've had no keys on the vehicle. We've calculated the sync data, reading the instrument cluster, the transmission and the ECU, and we've created a new key using the AUT RK0079. So we've done the whole job, reading all the modules, and we've programmed it in using the Obdstar. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more videos and content using brands such as Obdstar, Xsource, ACDP, Xtool, Lonsdor. And if you've got any questions, drop a comment below. Thank you.